enact things like MECA.
Thank you, Mr. Kwaku. And I'm reminded to mention that the names, the victims, Mark Essex, Mika Johnson, and Cosmo Santapera, these were all former military participants, all had military training. So I think it's really constructive for victims of racism to take those skills that they learn from white supremacists and apply it to counter war. Um, I think Malcolm X said the chickens come home to roost. I think this is a great example of that metaphor. I may be incorrect though. Again, all had military training. Maybe they well, for the ones who experience combat, I believe Gavin Long and Mika Johnson, they probably were like, I've already killed a ton of brown people for white people, and still nothing has changed. They're still over here killing us black people, non-white people in the street, like something worse than animals, like monsters or something. So counter violence was initiated. Mark Essex, I don't believe he saw combat, but he did experience a ton of racism by white people in the Navy, and that is what not prompted him to do what he did. Again, it was the death of two student protesters in 1972 that caused him to practice counter war. Uh, but really interesting, very interesting. I think this part is really important for folks to remember and understand when discussing or thinking about war slash counter war. And this is from page 374, where the code says the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action means the willful and deliberate elimination of the existence of one or more racist white supremacists, the willful and deliberate elimination of any existence, whether a person, plant, or animal, is a serious act. No existence of any kind should ever be eliminated unnecessarily. It is never necessary to eliminate existence except when the law of compensation demands it. The law of compensation requires that when one person plans willfully and deliberately executes another, that person must also execute himself or herself. To eliminate the existence of some racist white supremacists in order to stop them from practicing racist white supremacy is oftentimes necessary. The very function of the system of white supremacy itself makes the elimination of white supremacists, people who practice racism, often necessary. So, you know, people who practice racism should not be on the planet. Um, Evidence shows that ending the existence of a suspected racist is a sufficient way of causing that person to stop practicing racism. It's much more sufficient than asking and begging or pleading. So if a person, if a victim of racism chooses to compensate for their position by eliminating one or more racists, as long as they are prepared to eliminate themselves, then according to the code, is a very just act. And I really appreciated what you read, Kwaku, about the judge, jury, and executioner aspect, because I think it makes sense that it makes a lot of sense for victims of racism to judge correctly that white people who practice racism are in need of some sort of compensation for their actions. And evidence could suggest that one of the best forms of that compensation could be counter violence, counter war, um, practicing Mecca, or just counter war and our using our chosen methods. I think I really like this part as well because it really solidifies and constantly reminds us of the united independent aspect of what we're trying to do here. What is it going to take to solve the problem as a united independent force? And 374, the code states, well, first, maybe I stand corrected. There's no such thing as a, oh yeah, we're not a counter racist counter force yet, but we hopefully with effective numbers can be a united independent force geared towards producing justice. Anywho, the code states, since white supremacy racism is all engrossing among the people of the known universe, and since it dominates all of the so-called groups of non-white people, then the only effective force by people against the white supremacists must begin with and be sustained by individual victims of white supremacy, speaking and or acting in a united, independent fashion, like atoms, molecules, or single sparks of fire. Very, very profound, to say the least. I know, and that's how we have to be. I see white people as being some sort of hive mind, connected on the same wavelengths of practicing racism, white supremacy, and maintaining it and expanding it. Any thoughts or comments?
Hive minded, kind of like the Borg from Star Trek.
Well, I have one thing I'd like to add too. I did look through the Black Love is a Revolutionary Act book in chapter 37. That's the Omar Thornton chapter. It's chapter 37. Omar Thornton should be a wake up call for Black America. That's the title. And it has a pretty detailed transcript of the Omar Thornton phone call too to 911. So yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Was it ever explained who exactly Omar Thornton is? I don't know who that is. I may have missed it.
Simply a victim of racism who committed Mecca and Connecticut, Manchester. He killed 8 suspected racists, then himself, Omar Thornton.
I got the book right in front of me from Black Love is a Revolutionary Act. Here's the opening 2 paragraphs of the chapter. I can read them really quick. On August 3rd, 2010, Omar Thornton, a 34-year-old Black male, walked into his workplace fully armed and shot and killed 8 of his white co-workers at Hartford Distributors, a beer delivery company in Hartford, Connecticut. The reason, in the words of Omar Thornton, you probably want to know the reason I shot this place up. They treat me bad over here, and they treat all the other Black employees bad over here too. So I just take it into my own hands, and I handled the problem. And that's the first 2 chapters of chapter 37 in Black Love is a Revolutionary Act, and that should answer the question.
Certainly does to me. A victim of racism best describes Omar Thornton. So I see white people are like, they have their code and they're really about their code. Their code is their white code of practicing racism, white supremacy is their God, is their religion, is everything they hold dear in their mind, hearts, and psyche. So this is how we have to be. You know, we have to be individual atoms, molecules, but a part of a organism that wants to survive. We have to be tiny atoms in a singular organism that wants to survive and solve a problem. We have to do this individually. So I really like how Richard Lee Fuller has phrased this in his code book. And I'm also going to read from 375, which states, under white supremacy, each victim is alone, and the very conduct of white supremacy prevents its victims from formally organizing as a group against it. This leaves only the individual victim of white supremacy as the only directly self-sustaining opponent of white supremacy. This is not only functional, but also just and correct. This way, no individual has to rely on other individual victims in order to oppose white supremacy. In effect, this is self-reliance in its basic form, and is the basic essence of compensatory unity for a racially subjugated classification of people. So every victim is alone. We should not. I really like this part of code, you know, the self-reliance, being able to rely on solely oneself only should be all the comfort we need in doing what needs to be done. We should not be waiting on anyone to show up in a suit, talking cute, any white person to show up in a cute, talking cute, or anyone for that matter to show up and solve this problem. We all have to be that person who is trying to solve the problem, making sure white people are solving the problem. And that can best be done by everyone becoming self-relying. You know, it can't be self-sustaining because you need white people for in all areas of people activity. But you could definitely rely on yourself to do what you can to change your thought, speech, and behavior to compensate and counter this problem that we have called racism and white supremacy.
I have a question. So when speaking about Mecca, you know, in the basically what qualifies you as committing Mecca, it would be to have only what's the word I'm looking for? Eliminated those who would classify themselves as white. So do you think those who have committed Mecca would be considered not confused about racism?
I would say that people who have committed Mecca while knowing it was Mecca are perhaps the people who are less confused, but Mr. Omar Thornton seemed to be very confused about racism and white supremacy because he was in bed with a white woman. So I think it's incorrect to think that because many people may commit Mecca without ever having an awareness that this concept exists. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
If anyone else wants to share, please be my guest. Did anyone bring notes to share today? Or
I wanted to comment on another part where he talks about the degree of pain. It says, question, what is meant by the term degree of pain? How much pain should a victim of racism feel and or tolerate? What is the correct measure of suffering for a victim of racism before he or she enacts maximum emergency compensatory action? Answer: the degree of pain felt by a victim of racism as a result of white supremacy is known to no other person than the person who feels it. It is therefore correct for a victim of racism to enact maximum emergency compensatory action only if that degree of pain is unbearable to that person for a prolonged period of time. Before it is correct for a victim of racism to enact MECA, he or she must do everything that he or she can to seek justice by repeatedly requesting it and constantly attempting to work to produce it by all other logical and correct means. He or she should not attempt to do this until it is reasonably certain that the pain of injustice caused and or promoted by racism is not only too much to bear, but that the damage to his or her ability to function effectively to promote justice by other means is beyond repair. So I thought that this was very interesting. I felt like, when talking about the degree of pain, one thing I noticed a lot of victims do is like they they have things called like the pain Olympics, where you see who's suffering the most, and then by doing that, you try. I don't know what the purpose of or what you're trying to what the goal is, but you're just trying to prove that you're in more pain than the other person, so you must be able to tolerate it more. But I like how this kind of it like reminds us that that's an individual thing. Like pain is subjective, right? So you only know how much you can tolerate, and ultimately those actions may lead you to MECA. If you just because one victim may be able to tolerate the pain or the degree of pain or the mistreatment doesn't mean that another victim is able to. It just seems like Neely Fuller has really thought about these candidates or this MECA quite quite thoroughly. I think that under a system of racism, white supremacy, Neely Fuller must have known that this was bound to happen and that these individuals were going to be out there. That's it.
Yeah, they call that the oppression Olympics. I remember that. Those types of phrases being thrown out when victims of racism are attempting to talk about their problems. So yeah, I really appreciate this aspect, this part as well. Like it's up to the individual's pain threshold is all that matters. I have a certain pain threshold, and everyone in this room has their own pain threshold. So it's up to us to say, okay, this is enough. I've had it up to here, and then do what they think is the best course of action to counter and end that pain for good. I really like the constant reminder that maximum emergency compensatory action is a promotion of justice. It's attempting to make up for the lack of non-just and the most in a very very serious effective manner, because you're saying to the white supremacists that know that your existence, no existence, first of all, is worthy to is deserving, I should say, is deserving to be in the state of domination. But you're saying to the white supremacists that I am correct thinking enough to eliminate the enemy, which is the racist man, racist woman, racist child, or eliminate the enemies, and also take myself out of the equation so I could no longer be subjected to this torture, this mistreatment that white people have going on 24/7. And a piece of code that says this much better than I am doing right now, it can be found on 367, which states Maximum emergency compensatory action is a promotion of compensation for the absence of justice. When maximum emergency compensatory action is enacted, it is to help make up for and or to help produce that which is missing. That which is missing is justice, balance between people, because racism, white supremacy promotes injustice. One of the basic values that is missing in the known universe that must be promoted by the victims of racism is justice. Justice is the only value that compensates for injustice, non-justice. Maximum emergency compensatory action is a maximum emergency means of promoting compensation for a lack of justice. This means that it is enacted to help promote balance between people by causing the racist white supremacist to be level with his or her victims, non-white persons, through the medium of non-existence for both. So yeah, it's one of the very, very, if not one of the only ways to put racist man and racist woman and racist child on the same playing field as us is by getting that temporary power, immediate power, I think is what the code calls it, the immediate power to control a person's existence by choosing to eliminate it is one of like makes a lot of sense how we can be on the same playing field for those for that moment in time where we are eliminating a racist or suspected racist. It makes a lot of sense to me, you know, if we are going to use our immediate power to do harm to a person, it should be harm in the form of just violence against the people who have received this kind of violence the least, which is racist man, racist woman, and racist child. So to me, it makes a lot of sense, and I definitely appreciate the concept. I hope this concept and many others in the book will be practiced and allow us to produce justice. Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
I just wanted to share a comment from page 378, and it's in the form of a question and answer. It says, question, is maximum emergent compensatory action an insane mean of conducting counter war against racist war makers? Answer, all killing of people by people is the result of insane teaching and conditions, but under current conditions, white supremacy, maximum emergency compensatory action is a forlorn and final way that an individual victim of racism can oppose war, and some of the war makers, when some ways have not proven effective, and at the time most needed. Maximum emergency compensatory action is the most honest method of being counter violent to express many quickly, and effectively the concept that is used in the violence by one person against another for unjust reason or objectives, but result in waste of both rather than profit for either. Maximum emergency compensatory action is one of the most explicit, functional, and deadly statements against war and injustice. So I just found that interesting how he stated that. I mean,
Yeah, I also appreciated the sound logic that emanates from those passages. It makes so much sense. Killing has been made such a non-serious act. Some people kill every single day, whether it's for fun or glory. They do it every single day, and the way that the code approaches the act of killing is very serious, and it's has a constructive purpose. And the Mecca concept, the purpose of killing is to promote the production of justice and the elimination of racism, white supremacy. There's very few acts of killing, if any, on planet Earth that serves that purpose of producing a system of justice. So yeah, counter races, counter violence is desperately needed on planet Earth, because it seems to quote Mr. Cosmos Centopera, blood and revenue is what seems to be what the white supremacists care about. And so these words and asking for a system of justice seem to be doing very little. So maybe counter war, counter violence is more needed. I may be incorrect though. And I really like the aspects on can Mecca cause chaos, or is Mecca a form of terrorism? And I'm gonna just read what the code says about it, which can be found on 377. And the code states, question: will the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action by any victim of racism who chooses to employ it cause chaos? Answer: no. No victim of racism can, by employing maximum emergency compensatory action, cause chaos among any people, white or non-white. The people themselves, both white and non-white races and non-races, decide what the relationship between people will be after an enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action. If there is chaos following the enactment of Mecca, it would be because the racist white supremacists willed it so. The white supremacists are the only people who are powerful enough to cause or prevent chaos among the people of the known universe. The victims of white supremacy should not concern themselves with the possibility of chaos. They should concern themselves with the production of justice. And the same measure of values, injustice and chaos are one and the same. So very significant. We live in a terroristic, chaotic place full of suffering and misery. So the chaos is already here. The confusion is already here. Mecca is intended to diminish and or put an end to that confusion and that chaos that the system of white supremacy produces 24/7. And in regards to terrorism, again, racism, white supremacy is the greatest form of terrorism ever to ever exist on planet Earth. But the code says, question: how does maximum emergency compensatory action differ from terrorism? Answer: terrorism is any unjust act that is basically intended to frighten people. Maximum emergency compensatory action is intended to stop one or more people from practicing racism, white supremacy. By terminating their existence, maximum emergency compensatory action is not enacted for the purpose of causing people to be terrified. It is for the purpose of helping to produce justice. A maximum emergency compensatory action is not for the purpose of having a person be remembered as a hero or heroine. And the counter war against racism, white supremacy, it is not for the purpose of showing off. It is not for the purpose of expressing hatred for the people who practice racism. It is not for the purpose of showing how skillful one can be and enacting counter-racist counter-violence. The basic purpose of an act of maximum emergency compensatory action and all of this insanity is to help produce justice, balance between people by having the results of a cruel, insane, and unbalanced system, white supremacy began to compensate itself for its cruel and insane existence. Through the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action, all of the people directly involved died cruelly, insanely, and correctly as a result of the existence of the system of white supremacy racism. This too is all in accordance with the law of compensation, the law of laws. So very should I dare I say it, powerful words from Mr. Neely Fuller, and very logical as well. You know, if a non-white person, I think even if a victim of racism does not want to practice MECA, even if them practicing counter war using their chosen methods, even that shouldn't be considered terrorism, because they're not trying to frighten people. They're trying to put an end to the system of white supremacy. And like what was mentioned earlier in this segment, I'll just read it again. In order for this problem to be solved, 3 things may have to occur. The first one being non-white people consistently kill white people in numbers equal to or greater than the number of non-white people killed. So if a person wants to, a victim wants to practice counter war by taking care of that first aspect, without doing MECA, then I think is also just and correct. You know, my thinking may be too incorrect and too insane, but I this is what I suspect to be true, because white people kill for fun. They kill 24/7 all day. All day, Black people are being destroyed. Black children are being destroyed 24/7. This is happening. So if white people in equal numbers are greater to begin to be eliminated, then perhaps they will get serious about solving the race problem, because no person, thing, or creature should be killed, destroyed indiscriminately. If we do not have the right to create existence, we do not have the right to eliminate existence. So it's been time that this killing of so-called life is compensated for, and the code implies that perhaps one of the best forms of that compensation is MECA, is maximum emergency compensatory action. So 378, the code states, question, is a person who advocates, supports, and or commits an act of maximum emergency compensatory action insane? Is an act of maximum emergency compensatory action an insane act? Answer, yes, on both counts. Question, why? Answer, because all acts that are intended to do harm to people are insane acts. Particularly insane are acts that include the killing of people as a way of changing arrangements between people. There is never a sane so-called reason for one person killing another. There are only insane excuses. Since the people of the known universe must act and react within the system of white supremacy racism, all are insane. Therefore, some killing of people under some conditions can be correctly regarded as a justifiable killing based on justifiable insanity. So I really appreciate this logic here. It shouldn't have taken me my entire life to realize that all killing is incorrect and should not happen on planet Earth. But due to the awesome power of white supremacy, I, like many victims of racism, and especially white supremacists and people who classify themselves as white, I, like them, once worshiped death, thought killing was fun and cool, and something that I would have no problem doing if need be. But as I become more correct thinking and more serious about solving the race problem, I of course see killing to be disgustingly incorrect. But that doesn't mean that it has stopped or slowed down since my awareness of it. So I, of course, understand the importance and significance of a justifiable killing. Omar Thornton definitely makes a lot of sense. Miss Williams, is that a new hand?
Same, it's new hand. I wanted to comment on that, what you just read on 378. I was gonna say that, but you said it for me, which is good. Now, I would look at it as to the point that because both of them are insane acts, right? Is that it would probably be dependent on the person's level of insanity. And I do think that there are levels of insanity. So, as I look at it, I would think, and I would hope that I wouldn't have to enact emergency Omega, rather. I would hope that I wouldn't have to, but I can't say for sure because I don't know what level of insanity I might reach. And it kind of reminds me of the song about Don't Push Me because I'm close to the edge, right? So based on that, it would depend on how much that person would have to endure to take them to that point. But I would hope that I wouldn't have to reach that point. But I can't say with 100% accuracy that I wouldn't reach that point, right? Because I don't know how much more that we are going to have to endure in this system before justice is produced. But I'm just going to hope for the best that for those that feel that they have to do that, and that's their only way to do it, then that's what they do. They, they're welcome to do it. But I would think not, because from my understanding of what I'm getting at is that say you enact that and then you kill up these white people, right? And say you take 10, okay, just good day, you take 10, then you turn around and take yourself. Now, to me, I don't see justice being served in doing that, but the person who enacts that may see that as a form of justice because you got 11 people gone and justice still ain't here, right? So to me, it would be you deciding if that's for you or not. Now, to me, I would think not, because if killing 11 people would bring justice, I would say yes. But if killing 11 people and justice still not going to be here, I would think not. But that's just my personal opinion. And I could be wrong, but that's just how I see it. I mean,
No, you're very correct. It's not my place to tell the story, but I believe at once point this concept had the word justice somewhere in it, and Edward Williams communicated to Neely Fuller Jr. that it's not justice, no matter, it's not, if one person cannot have justice without the other. So then I heard the concept was changed to maximum emergency compensatory action. So, but I totally understand your logic, Ms. Williams. Yeah, and yeah, your thinking is very sound and correct to me at least. Yeah, but that's why I say that it's not justice, it's compensation, and a individual victim who is enacting Mecca is compensating for the violence they have been subjugated to, the violence that the people who are like them have been subjugated to and met with. The compensating for that by giving that violence to white people. That's my understanding of it. And yeah. Are there any other folks who'd like to share?
With that word compensate being there, I can then say yes, right? Because it's up to that individual person what their compensation should be. 10 people might, 11 people might be that person's compensation. Whereas another person would say, no, that's not the compensation I would need. But if compensation means what you deem to be correct or fair for you at that time, then that compensation would be fair. I mean,
Understood. So I think it's really important to also read this part from 379. I'm just gonna read basically this whole page because I don't want to, if I am coming off as a victim who is promoting the killing of white people, that is not my intention. I'm just attempting to solve the problem of racism and white supremacy and replace it with a system of justice. So I'm just gonna read 379 to reiterate my goal, and I hope majority of our goals here, which is to produce a system of justice. So for 379, the code states maximum emergency compensatory action is a form of willful and deliberate counter violence against the violence that is racism and white supremacy. It should be fully understood that maximum emergency compensatory action is to only be considered by those non-white people whose existence under racism and white supremacy has become for them as individuals totally unbearable, with no meaningful relief forthcoming within a reasonable period of time during their existence in the known universe. I really like this concept as well, this part, because if non-white people and their religions, you know, that religion can produce in a person the ability to know the reality that they're waiting on a savior forever. You know, Jesus is coming someday to save us, or the prophet is coming someday to save us. And I think that mentality is really incorrect. So I do appreciate that the code is saying with no meaningful relief forthcoming within a reasonable period of time. Like someday, one day, it's not a reasonable amount of time at all. Any person, anyway, back to my point of not promoting the killing of white people, but promoting the production of justice. And if Mecca is necessary, then by all means, Mecca is necessary. So continuing from 369, from 379, no person should willfully seek, find, and deliberately end the existence of another person without ending his or her own existence. Eliminating one's own existence after willfully and deliberately eliminating the existence of another person is correct. Such an act makes a person sincere in his or her belief in justice and in his or her regard for the value of existence and non-existence. This is in accordance with the law of compensation. The willful and deliberate ending of the existence of another, and too many instances, has been a game. Some methods of making war are oftentimes referred to as war games. Fighting and killing has in many ways been treated as a sport and entertainment. To seek, find, and willfully and deliberately put racist or suspected racists to death, and then to surrender to captivity by racists, suspected racists, or the victims of racism recruited for such purposes, it is not only unjust and incorrect, but defeats the purpose of taking counter-violent action against racists. If a victim of racism does this, it indicates that he or she has chosen to take counter-violent action against racists that was not absolutely necessary. It indicates that the person engaging in such action was making a temporary protest rather than engaging in an emergency act of maximum necessity. Such action is unjust. So the person who's doing Mecca, no capture, no retreat. Death by oneself is the only way to successfully enact Mecca, maximum emergency compensatory action. And Mecca, that term, Mecca is not used in this book at all. That is just how I am shortening it, because saying it so many times can be quite tiresome. So just to clear that up, Mecca is not mentioned in this book. It's the term maximum emergency compensatory action. I'm just calling it Mecca for short. Any thoughts, comments, questions before I continue?
Yes, as far as, victims feeling like their pain of racism is greater than other victims, is that kind of why other victims is more blissful to the ignorance of racism, because of their experience is not as greater as the other? If that makes sense, it's more mild as opposed to somebody else that is subjected to it. Like, I could probably say my brothers probably deal with it more compared to me. That doesn't mean that I don't deal with it. It's just their pain is more worse than mine. If that makes sense.
Are you asking a question, Ms. Johnson?
Yes, if that's why people are more ignorant or easy to stay in a blissful space because of the pain they endure of racism.
Well, on top of the pain that racism inflicts on its victims, it also produces retardation and a tremendous amount of confusion. So I would say, while a person's pain may be a reason why they're unable to develop the awareness that they need to counter the system, while that may be possible, that the pain has prevented the awareness, I think logic will suggest that it's mostly the confusion that is produced from the system that makes people not want to counter it, not want to think about it. I think it's more of the confusion in combination with pain, let alone the pain. Because before reading this section, I didn't even I wouldn't refer to my condition as being painful. I would call it some sort of like mental anguish, some sort of torture, and torture for sure. But I wouldn't reduce what I'm experiencing to a mere to calling it pain, while that may be a correct term for some to use. but for me, not quite. Others like to take a crack at the question. Now we can move along.
You said the question again.
Because of the pain that other victims go through that is more severe than others, is that why victims that doesn't have as much pain as other victims of racism can be ignorant or blissful to the racism they're objective to?
Ooh. I would. I think so, because I think it kind of goes back to like fear, like that many victims experience. So sometimes when a victim is witnessing another victim in greater pain, they are sometimes grateful that they are not in so much pain, or they are not receiving such harsh treatment, even though they are being mistreated. I don't know if I would call it bliss, but I think it's just definitely them being afraid of receiving just as much pain or mistreatment, if that makes sense.
Go ahead, Ms. Williams, and then Mr. Ray.
Okay, I would say that people's level of sensitivity to things can differ, and it would be based on what their environment and what they're dealing with. Now, I was looking at, like, I've never really grasped the idea about these video war games. I've never grasped that. Even as a grandparent, I never bought my children or my grandchildren war games as to play with. Okay, and I came out of the Head Start program. Well, we didn't even allow children to even have guns in the Head Start programs, right? We would there are many toys there, but guns were not there. We never allowed that. So it was like, to me, you're promoting violence, right, by introducing children to guns and various things. So I never grasped the idea of the video games being used as a form of sport and entertainment. So I see that a lot of not only non-white males, but white males as well, they really get a kick out of these war game videos. And to me, that's actually desensitizing you as a human of taking life, you know. And if you're playing a game, right, and in this game, you may start out just shooting at airplanes, right? And you say, oh, well, that's not too bad, right? There you're shooting at airplanes, but there are people in that airplane, right? And that when that airplane hits those people that are in that airplane, they die, right? So it's like we are being desensitized to killing itself, right? And kind of glorying in it, if though it's something fun or it's something we should accept. I remember too that when we had cowboy movies years ago, which you still have today, but back then you had more, and the white people were killing the Indians, right? You know, and people gloried in that. I remember watching the program, and I thought that's what they're supposed to do, just kill them. You know what I'm saying? Didn't think about what is the Indians doing that they should be killed. But I think that we're desensitizing ourselves as humans to glory in war and glory in killing and using it as a sport or as an entertainment. I'd never liked boxing as well, right? For that various reason. Because why do we want to harm another individual? And then as we harm them, we glory in it, or we laugh about it, or we say, oh, well, I won over that. But I'm not saying maybe there are no women who like that, because there probably are. But I just think that that's kind of more of a male thing, and they tend to think that's a part of their malehood to do that, you know. I remember my cousin, he was a little boy. he had some little back then they had like a little figures, right? And he had some army men, and he would always like to play war. Now he ended up later joining the Air Force. I mean, not joining the Air Force, but joining the service. And when he came back from the service, he became an alcoholic. He couldn't even deal with the trauma that he had faced while he was there. So he left a person who was so-called sane, and he came back more insane than he was when he left, right? So I never saw that as something we should be producing or should be glorying in, because we're to me, when we're doing that, we're actually glorifying killing. You know what I'm saying? When we should be looking at how to treat each other fairly and balanced, but killing is not the way of bringing balance about anything, you know, but just my opinion. I mean,
Excellent, Miss Williams. Go ahead, Mr. Ray.
Yes, if I recall correctly, the young lady asked what her question was in regards to confused victims and happiness. And I suspect that the more informed you are of racism, white supremacy, the less happy you'll be. And also, if I can recall correctly, in the code, Mr. Fuller speaks of happiness coming in sporadic bursts, not lasting very long. And I find that to be correct. So yeah, the more informed you are, you know, excuse the background noise, I'm still at the park, but the more informed that you are, it's very difficult to truly be happy. And when you do find those sporadic bursts of happiness, it's usually when you're doing something constructive, something towards the production of justice. So I'll mute.
Thanks everyone for answering the question. Really important what Mr. Ray said about happiness, and also what the code says about happiness. Happiness being something that happens at various moments in time, not something we should try to produce ourselves, but perhaps wait to expect when we are doing something of constructive value, doing something that's going to bring constructive results. Yeah, but as for focusing on our pain, we should want to focus on putting an end, a permanent end to the pain, not alleviating it temporarily, but putting a complete end to it, which can be accomplished by producing a system of justice, which will replace the system of racism, white supremacy. So the final note I am going to read and share comes from page 380. And I think this book is very important for the folks listening. I highly recommend, suggest purchasing your copy and practicing it, practicing the code and sharing this information with other victims of racism will do a tremendous effort into solving this problem. But anyways, the code states on 380, question, what form of war or counter war that includes the killing of people is more justifiable than maximum emergency compensatory action? Answer, as long as white supremacy racism exists, no form of war or counter war that includes the killing of people is more justifiable than maximum emergency compensatory action. When someone says or implies that there is no justifiable reason for the concept or the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action, say the following: as long as the killing of people by people can be justified for some reasons, maximum emergency compensatory action can be justified for one reason. The reason for the existence of the concept of maximum emergency compensatory action is justified by the existence of the system of white supremacy racism. So the only reason we have for this concept of Mecca to exist is the system of white supremacy. I totally support this concept. Hopefully, my limits are not reached anytime soon, if ever that I am prompted to practice Mecca. But for those who have reached their limits, totally understandable. No person should be subjected to the system of white supremacy. No person is deserving of the misery that the system of white supremacy produces on a global scale, 24/7. Yeah, that concludes my my notes minus closing comments. I'll leave room for folks to share and comment if they have anything to share and comment before we get into closing comments. Or maybe we could just get into closing comments. Would anyone like to start?
Yes, my closing comment is for the Mecca. I thought in the beginning, like, what a odd idea that that would be kind of our end result, but it's understand of the compensation due to the fact that we're in this white supremacy racist system. Eventually, because they reflect of killing non-white people and the terrorist things that they do, it's only justifiable way, well, not even justifiable, but just another way of you're kind of getting what you're giving. So in order to not receive, their fear of losing power is the fear eventually that they're creating due to people losing their sanity and doing these compensation acts. So if they want an end to that in general, where it just doesn't kind of eliminates them in itself, then they will want to create a balance where everybody is equal.
For my closing comment, Mecca, since it was very much the topic of discussion today, it's talking about Area 9 war, Area 9 war. The only reason why something like this is necessary is because of the existence of racism, white supremacy. And until the system of racism, white supremacy has been replaced with a system of justice, I think it is correct to expect instances of maximum emergency compensation action to continue and to be justifiable. That's all for me. I thought this discussion was very informative and very constructive. I'm looking forward to the next discussion. Thank you. I can go ahead and I'll go ahead and pick Dan. Yeah. Here you go, Dan.
Okay, my closing comments in regard to the pages we covered. Mecca is something that takes place sometimes, and the usual suspects do a good job of covering these events up. So the names you mentioned here, definitely go research them and make sure you save an article on them because they do a good job of making sure these names don't get out. So that's my closing comments.
Closing comments for those who would like to share, Mr. Ray, Miss Helen, Miss Williams. Thanks for the folks who have already shared.
Go ahead and go with my closing comments. One term that was mentioned repeatedly is the law of compensation. And since we're in the ninth area of people activity, I've been noticing a lot of things in the news recently. What comes to mind is here in Texas, it's going to be legal September 1st to carry firearms without a permit. And so as that relates to the law of compensation, I just thought it interesting that with no non-white person on the planet manufacturing weapons or ammunition, and with all the reproductive warnings that come with purchasing firearms and on the ammunition, you know, they talk about the reproductive harm that it could cause. And with white people already being at negative birth rate, you know, that seems fitting. That seems like the law of compensation itself, but not moving quick enough if you ask me. Thank you.
Agreed. Closing comments, anyone? And everyone? Ms. There we go.
Being in the system of racism, white supremacy, and the insanity that it brings, Mecca would not be needed if people were not being forced to be even more insane. So because we are insane and becoming more and more insane day by day because of the mistreatment and the abuse that's being done, that even if we don't want to see Mecca, it's gonna be, because insane people do insane things. I'm mute.
No closing comments. I unfortunately pleasantly enjoyed this business meeting, and that's all I have to say.
For me, yeah, it's just really tragic that that I came to this planet that is being dominated by racism, white supremacy, and the domination produces such misery and such suffering amongst its people that this concept Mecca had to be born. Very tragic, and but it is constructive reading material by people who are attempting to solve the problem, have attempted to solve the problem. This does help to encourage myself to continue to solve the problem. And as I researched Mark Essex, I would recommend folks reading his story and reading on what occurred that day, because when I was reading it, I I always felt like I was placed in his shoes, and I was in that hotel room with him, witnessing and experiencing him practicing counter violence against race soldiers, and yeah, the same with Mr. Cosmos Santapera, better known as Galvin Long, watching the very limited videos that are accessed that are available involving that day definitely makes me feel some type of way. Really tragic that these people were pushed to their limit and did what they did. Very nice to see them use their the tools given to them by white supremacy to attempt to produce justice, attempt to liberate Black people, however flawed their thinking and attempt was. It definitely had constructive intentions. But yeah, learning about these individuals and doing research on them this morning, especially Mark Essex, allowed me to do my workout war training and listen to that song Essex by Brian and Joe Scott Heron. Yeah, very constructive business meeting, everyone, and most certainly looking forward to next week as we continue our understanding of this concept called maximum emergency compensatory action, and further our understanding of white supremacy, what it is and how it works, and how we can produce a system of justice.